I'd like to call the Thursday, April 18th, regular meeting of the Advisory Committee to order. Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, doing a quick roll call. Just by numbers alone, I can see that we've got a quorum for this evening out of our 7-member board. Amy, great to see you. Deb, good to see you. Will, good to see you. And I'm filling in tonight for Jeff, who was called away. He had some family business that he needed to be able to take care of within the last few hours. But he is giving me
Lucky.
a packet of stuff to pass out, so I think we're just gonna take a minute or two to make sure that we have all the documents that we need for this evening. We'll vote some minutes in, and based on the agenda and on the advice of the chair, for some of the items that are on our committee, our agenda tonight, we've got the town administrator at our disposal to ask any questions based on these. He does not have a formal presentation. He is here for the agenda items that we have.
Okay.
Okay, so I passed out minutes, agenda. I've got Mike Curry's Town Reserve.
If you don't mind, I'll take one for Lee.
Okay.
Just gonna start making him a little pile.
I'm gonna put the extras up here by the telephone
Me? Oh, sorry.
to make sure that our other members have it. So that's the third handout. The fourth handout is the FY20 General Fund Budget to be submitted at annual town meeting. 2 copies for you.
Thank you.
One for Tony. One for Deb.
I already have one of those.
Oh, you already have one?
Yes.
Okay, one for myself. We've got Will Springs' submission of the policy on reserve transfers. 2 copies for you. Good evening, Mr. Terenzini. One for me. Will, do you need one? It's yours.
I already have that one.
Deb,
Thank you.
I got,
extras up by the phone.
I didn't have your electronics
Okay.
copy, so I did.
And the last is the revisions for the FY20 budget, changes made to worksheets upon final Board of Selectmen approval. The date on this doesn't have a date, but it's a change packet. Amy, 2 for you,
Please. Okay.
1 for me, 1 for Deb, 1 for Will, and 1 to the pile. Okay, got a call to order. We did the pledge. Let's go ahead and approve the minutes from the last meeting. I think it's just one set of minutes.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. And grab one for myself. Okay, you have before you the meeting minutes for the regular meeting for April 4th. And when you're ready, I'll entertain a motion to add them to the record.
I'll make a motion to accept the minutes from April 4th as written.
We have a motion. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second to add the meeting minutes for April 4th, our last meeting. Any discussion, any
I think there was
changes?
one area that I was gonna ask a question on.
Okay.
Let me. We got this so late, I didn't
Okay.
get all of it here. There was one part I had a question on. Well, maybe it was on some other meeting, some other meeting minutes I was looking at.
What was it?
It was in regards to, the policy that we had talked about. Oh, there it is, right in the front. Would need changes to Mass General Law, I'm not sure what he meant by that. We did talk about the Mass General laws and putting them on the policies, but I don't recall.
Let me see if I took a note on that. So you're talking about first paragraph, it was mentioned that a reference
Yeah,
to
yeah.
Department of Revenue in
You're
Mr.
right,
Spring's
right.
version would need to be changed to Mass General Law.
Right, and we did have it referencing Mass General laws on the copies that we had at the last time.
What we can do, we don't have to, we have a motion and a second, but we can, as a discussion item, we can actually postpone these until we get clarification, if you want further clarification.
Yeah, I would like clarification
Okay.
on that, because I don't recall that there was a Mass General law
Yeah,
version
I
needs
mean,
to
it
be
seems pretty
changed.
important to,
Yeah,
to
I mean, we
understand the
wanna make sure,
context.
because it is on the document that we were talking about. I wanna make sure we have the correct one.
And I don't have an extra note about that, okay? So the discussion point is to,
I can make a substitute motion to
or we can just, okay,
hold the table the
All
next
right.
meeting.
okay. So on the proposed motion as, to delay the adding the minutes to the record until the next scheduled meeting.
Right. Just table it till the next meeting.
Okay. Do you have a second?
Sure, I'll second.
Okay.
Okay.
On the substitute motion to delay adding the meeting minutes for April 4th, and you just call for a vote. Amy?
We're
We're
delaying.
delaying adding the minutes so we can get clarification
Sure.
on the first portion.
Yes, delay.
Okay. Deb?
Yes.
Will?
Yes.
And I vote yes as well. Okay. Okay, so we'll just take care of meeting minutes for the next one, for the next meeting, which is,
I think we need to have the discussion on that.
that should be May
Mr.
2nd.
Chairman. Yeah.
Yep.
We need to take and have a discussion on that and proceeding, once we get into the other agenda items, I'd like to suggest some things.
Okay.
Uh,
All right, so as I had said, we've got Mr. Terenzini's here tonight to, at the request of the board. I think we talked about it the last meeting. And then Mr. Bennett, in absentia, basically said, yeah, we do want his help and clarification for some of these items. So most of the items that he's prepared to talk about tonight are right along with our agenda budget. So, Mr. Terenzini, if you want to just take a seat at the mic, we can go through these all together from your perspective, or we can go one by one.
Well, before we get into that, Mr. Chairman, I took because the budget that we had gotten from the selectmen and Mr. Terrazini did an upper level and only had, as you saw, the suggested one that's going to the annual town meeting. And if you look at the expense budget in the document that they gave us on page, tab 16 on the budget, as I indicated, there is a tab for the advisory committee recommendations. And it said TBD. If we were to take and end up suggesting any change at all to any account number, we can't just plug a number in there, because if you look, there's a plus sign. If you hit it, it says that we can't end up getting into it. It's a protected sheet, so that we can't go into the individual account numbers under each and every department budget if we want to make changes, whether it be up or down or whatever. Knowing that, I ended up creating, and I sent that to everybody, tab 17, where I expanded that and put the 6 account numbers, where the column that suggests for the advisory recommendations. I made sure that it did work. I plugged some numbers in to make sure that whatever I plugged in to the individual department numbers rolled over, so I know it was working. And I checked all of the numbers, and if you look at the bottom of that sheet, the 9,690,279, it does end up following the bottom line number for tab 16. In addition, I went to each department.
Will, what was your purpose of doing that?
Well, it gives,
I get what you're saying about the protected sheet and that you recreated the sheet, but what
Right.
is your purpose to try and
if
make
we want to make
recommendations
changes to
by
any,
line item?
if we want to make changes to any account number under any department, we are unable to do that using the one that's in the book as it is. It's impossible.
But why do you want to change, why are you making recommendations line item wise? When I say line item, I mean to, like, when you say account number, so 5,100 personnel.
Yep.
You want to make recommendations.
Right. Mass General Law calls for us to take and end up having our recommended budget go before the town. We're unable to do that as tab 16 sits right now. We can't put a number in there, because what will happen is if we do put a number in there and it goes to town meeting, how's the accountant and the selectman and the administrator gonna know what we changed?
Yeah.
We could have changed something way down in account 2054. Okay? And it could have been a minor change, it could have been up, down, or whatever. We can't roll that up. It's impossible, based upon what we had. So I created this, and I went to every department, and as you see, I created a column that basically said advisory recommendations. So if we want to take it, we could end up putting the same number in, or change it, and it will roll up. That would be our recommendation to go before town meeting.
Okay.
So we have that ability to do that. And it will take us some time to do that. And that's really what the process is for advisory committees to do, and finance committees, is to go through the budget and make recommendations so that when you get to the top level and you have the account numbers, that it can be seen. If the budget that's being submitted to the town and that's the sheet that was sent to us, goes before the town. They don't know what account numbers are underneath there and what's on.
I think that you're gonna bore the living snot out of people if you go down to the line item, Will.
Well, here's what we have done in the past.
Okay.
Until we got to this particular, in the last couple of years, we were able to do that. And our recommendations went before the town. I'm advising that that's our job,
Okay.
we should be doing it.
So
If-
we still have a potential, because the budget is a warrant article, is it not?
That's correct, but if you make a change to the warrant article on any one of on this sheet here, what account are you changing? Can you show me what account, if we change the,
But to get
as
to
an
that
example,
level of granularity at this point in the process, to go through every single supplies, intergovernmental personnel, at that point, we're kind of working backwards from all of the work that we've done to this point. I mean, if we're gonna change a line item we had the departments right in front of us to
Yep.
talk through each one of those, to make a recommendation or to ask questions. That may be the natural process if you didn't like something, whether it's so, based on that, if you've done that level of work, let me ask you this.
Yep.
Have you gone through every line item, and do you feel like you actually had substantial changes?
yes, I have some changes.
Are you ready to talk through those changes?
Yes, I will end up talking about just individual ones, not going through all of them.
All right.
As an example, in our own advisory committee, we end up having a thing called for Vadar, if everybody recall. $700. It's also noted on here, the last time we used Vadar was 6/20. And at that time, I had suggested that if we're not gonna use it this year, and we're three quarters of the way through this year, and we haven't used it, do we really need to take and spend the town's money on such an item? To me, it's a waste of town's money, or taxpayers' money. The idea that they're gonna have Vadar read-only
Okay.
was a nice suggestion, but I don't see us, we haven't done it. We should not be having that as spending the money. Another one is under the selectmen.
Which
I'll
count?
check, I'll pick, the 51A account,
Okay.
expenses, employee support. Miscellaneous. I'd like a better definition of what miscellaneous is.
But
I can't
Will, we
approve.
went through this. We asked questions at the joint Saturday budget meeting. I'm sorry that you weren't at that meeting, but we actually went through this drill already. Because we have the town administrator here, Mr. Terenzini, if we went through a line item description, the way that Will is proposing as an alternate proposal for a budget, what are the ramifications of changing, using Will's example of the Vadar within the advisory committee's budget account?
So let me first say that I want to do the worst that I find objectionable in many politicians on TV. I need to digress for one moment.
Okay?
It is not statute that the advisory committee presents the budget to the town meeting. Should there be a reference to a statute that it is believed says that, if someone would provide me with that reference, I'll be happy to look at it.
Okay,
And
I know
Mass
that.
General Law,
Now,
39, Section 16.
I might
Hang
move
on,
on
I'll
to
I'll give
the
you a
balance
chance.
of it. The committee's had the budget in paper and in spreadsheet for nigh on to 7 weeks now. We've known this was coming. And I would have hoped we would have had that conversation before. So with respect to if there are specific items, I'd be happy to chat with them about with you. The money for Vadar, that was a committee request. I simply approved what the committee requested. If it's changed its mind, I would be happy to, look at increasing the reserve by the amount you want the Vadar to go down. And we can
So
go
what I'm
through-
hearing is that you could actually still make a change if someone came to you with a line item.
We have about 2 weeks left.
That can't be done.
And
The selectmen have already approved this budget.
Mr. Chairman, unfortunately, that also is an incorrect reading of statute. The selectmen had put a top-line budget in front of the community, and they will now, at the meeting, make a motion. It's always been my practice that if a finance committee, an advisory budget committee, a warrant committee has some things that they would like changed, to have that conversation. And if it can be agreed to close the gap in the spirit of compromise and to have folks united going into the town meeting, and it's a matter of, a couple thousand here, a couple hundred there, and we don't think that it impacts the operation, and we haven't been able to make our argument, well, we just amend the final number
I understand what you're
and
saying.
present that. Now, I got about 2 weeks left, and that's pretty close to the end of my run time.
We have 2 weeks left.
Yes, because we've started the voters' information guide.
Yep.
And that's where we'll be putting the actual motions in.
Yep.
And so compromise, where we could be united, hopefully, and move forward together, is still quite viable if we know what the issues are. But the window is
Yep. Can I?
closing.
So, just to make sure, I want to make sure we're addressing the questions as they go, so I don't wind up having a back and forth that's fruitless. So, Mr. Springs, did you hear what he said about being
Yes,
able to?
I heard what he said,
Okay.
and I'm saying that we have that opportunity, regardless of what he ended up saying. As an example, the first budget that we received way back when, and it's not in the budget book, is if you look at the selectmen's budget, item 12057. There's 2 additional
wait.
items that are
Well,
put on there.
I have to stop you. I want to make sure I'm addressing your concerns, because I'm most interested in making sure, just as Mr. Terenzini said, that in this period of cooperation, so if there is a change, if you, a member of this board that we all wind up voting on, if you wind up having several issues to say, we need to change line items here, this is gonna be for the best interest of us, using the town meeting function of additional motions, as we've done within the past couple town meetings, we can still achieve that. If we change the entire budget, if you're saying that in your view that the entire budget can still be amended or presented in an alternate fashion by the advisory board.
Yes.
That can still be done, not by changing what was put in the Warrant article, but if you didn't like the Vadar, if you didn't like this, it would be a long town meeting, and you'd probably have a lot of alternate handwritten stuff done to the moderator. It could still be done, and the end result is that the budget is amended the way that.
Mass General Law 39, Section 16 is very clear that you have an advisory or finance committee, and they are to present the budget to the annual town meeting. We do not have a bylaw that says the selectmen's budget or the administration budget should go to town meeting. Very clear.
In either event, Mr. Chairman, if there are changes that the advisory committee would like us to look at, we're happy to look at them. And if we can go together jointly, I think that's terrific. I'm not sure that we need to forgo that possibility in order to go forward in some sort of confrontational style that seems to be more to the taste of some. And I offer you that. We have until roughly the selectmen have a workshop on May 1, at which we'll be reviewing voters' guide, begin to look at motions. They have a formal meeting on May 8. The voters' guide needs to go to press. And, we have all the revisions. what went up, what went down, and if there's something that folks would like additional information on, I regret that it has taken us almost 7 weeks to get these questions, when we've been through the process at some length, but we're still certainly more than happy to address any question the committee has.
On Mr. Springs' inclusion that the advisory board presents the budget, I'd like
Our
to.
recommended budget, not a budget, our recommended budget. It doesn't mean that we create a brand-new budget. We look at the present one we have, and we make a recommendations. Some of the recommendations may be exactly the same number as what's in the budget, but there may be some that we move up or down. I've talked about this in past meetings to every one of you. So this has been my discussion for every one of you, that this is the process.
Okay. So the budget process that we have followed, and that I'm watching in great detail that we're presenting for, the warrant article actually has the budget, and it's presented to the town, whether it's through the voter's guide or otherwise, but it's made on a motion from the warrant to the townspeople for consideration. The amount of detail that we expect the town to have.
Is not in the warrant
Inspected.
article,
Right,
and there's a bulk number there.
correct?
So, should there be something you want to change?
No, I'm trying to compare both to be able to say there is the established way that we're going through it by warrant article, and then there is the alternate method or the supposed primary method that Mr. Springs is talking about. What I'm trying to illustrate, whether it's for this committee or the people that wind up watching this meeting, is that we're following a budget process, and that the way that it is occurring and has occurred is through the warrant process. The inclusion of detail that you're talking about, Mr. Springs.
And we've done that, by the way, we've had that level of detail in the past, except in the recent history here, in the last couple of years.
Okay, so when you say level of detail, the budget method that we went through on that Saturday day, morning and afternoon, where we went through line item, you're saying that that was done at town meeting, and who presented it?
The advisory ended up, and it was showing up on the screen, was showing the selectmen's recommended budget and the advisories. And the townspeople could see what we were recommending for a budget. And it's really up to the body at the town meeting to take an end up deciding what budget needs to be passed.
The department level of control, Mr. Chairman, is receiving increased adoption across the Commonwealth for many reasons. And that is what this Board of Selectmen has done. That said, if there is something in a sub-account this committee would like to talk about, I just don't know how many different ways or times to say it. We're more than happy to talk about whatever the question is. Some of these appear to be internal policy conflicts for the body itself to settle. You know, one of the expense items being called into question is an expense item this body asked for that I thought was settled and we simply approved as requested. If the body's changed its mind, it's extremely easy to simply tell us, you know, if you want that cut, we'll cut it. And frankly, I would just reallocate it to the committee's reserve.
Well, let me point something out. We had a line item budget years ago, up until this present administration. The only people that can end up dictating as to what type of budget is presented, omnibus versus anything else, is the legislative body. That's the people. None of the town voted to take an end up saying that they wanted an omnibus budget. It was presented to them, and yes, I agree that they saw it and they passed it. Nobody questioned it. It's just too bad that they didn't question it.
And what's
It
the
should've-
advisory committee for? I mean, you quite often say that we are the voice of the people, like
We
the
did.
legislative body.
We did bring it up at the meeting. In fact, it was brought up to end up doing a line item budget, and brought up. And because of what the selectmen ended up saying, that it did not pass. So it was brought up. There is things in this budget, as an example, emergency management, 75% increase in their budget. And if you look at the budget to actual for them, up until the one that we have, at the end of February, going 2/3 of the year, they have used 0 out of the $1,000 that were given to them last year. So we should end up increasing their budget.
So why don't, when we go through our pre-town meeting and we wind up voting on these things, why don't we make our recommendations then? Or if we're using this time now to do that, then why don't we, I mean, we haven't, it's not on our agenda tonight to go through those things. Why aren't we proposing it at
Well,
this point?
the budget is, Mr. Bennett did put the budget on there, the
Yeah.
FY20 budget.
Well, right, but as far as actually making our recommendations for the pre-town meeting, and then what, basically, we're recording what the advisory committee's recommendations are going to be, isn't that what you're talking about? We wind up saying, nope, we didn't like, what article number is the budget, the operating budget?
I don't know at this point.
Let's say it's article number.
Let's call it 18.
It's article number 18. The advisory board recommends not doing that. Here is the proposed alternate budget. Here are the highlights from what the changes are. I could get behind that, but we're not there yet.
Mr. Chairman, can I ask
Sure.
why we would play that kind of confrontational politics when all the advisory committee has had to do for 6 weeks is say, we got a question about this one. Can we get Rich Curtis on the speakerphone so he can answer us? And if he can't make the advisory committee happy and you say, we really can't get behind this, I say to the
yes.
There were some
department head.
changes made on the 10th that aren't in the
It
book.
would have to go to a vote to this committee when we did the pre-town meeting, and based on that, that's what the vote would be.
And-
So if the majority of the committee decided that they didn't like a certain line item or something that Mr. Springs is talking about, whether it's Vadar or otherwise, something that was going to fundamentally change that budget, this board would have to vote for that and say, we vote, here is our recommendation. We are in favor of the budget, yes, for Article 18, or no, here's the proposed alternate. What I'm saying is, it would have to go to a vote for this committee, the whole committee.
But I'm also saying, if that's the consensus of the committee, and I can see that, I'm not gonna flounder around and arm wrestle over $1,000, 500, 300, and we'll say, okay,
We may not either.
We'll change it.
It's up to the committee.
and we change the number, and then the committee and the select board are hopefully able to move forward jointly. And the advisory committee is in a position to recommend the entire of the budget. You gave us your questions. The department had a chance to make their explanation. They weren't able to make their case. I'm gonna have to weigh out how critical I think that is to the operation of the agency. And then we might say, sorry, guys, can't come to agreement on this one, or, okay, we'll change it.
I think it would only get to the point of, you talked about, are we arguing over $1,000 or something like that? If this committee voted on a majority, would it be a helpful civic exercise to fight over $1,000? Or would it be a helpful civic exercise to be able to get to the level of granularity that Will's talking about? Because this 7-member committee wound up voting for something.
I think it's a helpful civic exercise to show different bodies who might have different points of view engaging in a full exercise and study of the facts, and then compromising and moving forward jointly on behalf of the community. I think that's the better civic exercise.
Okay. Does this committee think that we've done that this far, or that it has yet to?
It has yet to be done as far as I'm concerned.
Okay.
I think the joint meeting that we had was really the opportunity for people to stand up and say, just to use your example, Mr. Curtis, explain to me why this or whatever. I know that myself, being at the meeting, that was my first time ever doing something like that. I just can't disagree when the chief of police, for example, stands up and says that this is something he wants and he needs. I don't feel like I'm in a position to tell him, I don't think so.
Well, I look at, as an example, another example I'll give. I look at this budget that we have before us, and the highway department is actually a decrease in the budget. We have deplorable roads in this community. You hear this, all the folks out. If we have reduced that budget, and we have openings, that's an issue that we have not put enough money in there. That's my cut at it. As to which particular account numbers should be increased, that's something that we need to take and discuss. As an example, we do not have a mechanic now. The town's looking for a mechanic. We had a very good mechanic. I won't go into why the individual is not here. If we can't get that a mechanic to do that level that he was doing, the town's gonna have to go out and get that services done somewhere else. It's gonna be more costly.
So,
We have-
emergency management, you said, how much percentage did they spend, are they spending, change from last year?
Look at the tab 17 if you do.
I'm looking at their entire budget. Good,
Okay,
lay it on me.
here's this one here. You want emergency management? Okay,
You said they're spending 75% more than they did last year.
yep,
This is one of your examples.
right there.
$35,000 is a capital expense. It's not even coming out of,
I understand that. I'm not talking about the capital.
There is an increase for emergency management as, for instance.
$750.
Of $750.
so this committee needs to really listen to what you're saying, Will, because now we're arguing over $750 for
Of which-
emergency management.
Of which $500, if I recall correctly, is for a training program, so that
Animal
the
rescue
CERT
training.
Yeah, so to look at it and say, well, they didn't spend X, and now they want this, and so therefore it must be wrong. We need to get behind the numbers.
Yeah.
We need to be able to talk about them, and if we can't justify it and make you comfortable, then shame on us, and we are open to amending
Yeah.
it.
It's
The
more
time
to
is
Amy's
running
point.
out.
We've already done that. Will.
The budget to actual
Will,
is-
Will, this is, and I'm a big fan of that document. I really am, in terms of execution. We've talked about it a lot. In fact, we added into the town reserve policy consideration. This is what I would recommend, Will, and I want to move on with our agenda and take advantage of the fact that we've got Carter with us tonight. We're going to follow the budget process that we've been using within the last few years. That's what we're following with. If we have any recommendations, we're gonna catch those, whether it's a civic exercise or not, we're gonna catch them, and this board's gonna be able to vote on them. So if you have issues and we go through, and whatever article that is, if we have to spend an hour or more talking about those things, we can do that. And
Right.
it's gonna address that stuff. The second item I would recommend, this issue of who's presenting the budget and basically the budget process, I don't want to try and tackle that tonight because I think we need the full committee here, and we need to make sure that we have a fruitful discussion where it's not basically an argumentative session trying to say who's supposed to do that. If you do, if it comes through that it's supposed to be another way, or we think it's going to actually work a better way to present this budget to the town, let's look at that, and if it winds up becoming an article, we can't get it as an article to this town meeting, but for fall town meeting, and we wind up changing that process, I follow you with that, I understand. But that we're not gonna achieve a fundamental change to our budget process, that we're fully on board the bus right now at this point. If you want to affect change and you see there's errors within this, I think that we're going to be able to tackle that within the budget process that we have. And 2 weeks within this, I think, when is our pre-town meeting? where we make our recommendations?
We need to
Well,
vote on
not
a
right
date
now,
tonight.
we have not, the suggested date was May 2nd. That's not in firm contract, concrete. As you saw, Mr. Bennett actually said that needed to end up, we needed to take and talk about that, because he has to put an advertisement in the paper prior to that meeting. So if we change that, say to the next week after, we would end up having to take and end up
All right.
having the
Do
meeting
you
on
have
the
that as-
second.
Do you have
and-
that as an issue or a note that we need to be able to address within the minutes?
Yeah.
I mean, just take a note. So that's where we're at with that. If we can get back onto, we're talking FY 2020 budget. Did you have any items that, let's come at it from this perspective. Did we have any questions that the town administrator can actually address? Or, Mr. Terenzini, do you have any,
I have a global thing that I
Okay.
wanted to try to
Okay.
touch upon.
thank you.
After your last discussion, I had emailed your chairman to tell him that I'd be more than happy to come in tonight and chat. And I just want to make sure we're all clear that if the override of 988 and change does not pass, the school district actually needs to cut roughly $1.2 million. Please remember that we're 84% roughly of their number. Frankly, I don't see where they could or might be willing to cut $1.2 million or even half of that. So that had moved to a conversation of, well, if we cut half and they cut half, we'd have to cut, maybe we could cut the budget 8%. So what I've put together here, and this is not at the decimal level. This is at the kind of high level overview. I need folks to understand that there are a number of items you cannot cut, period, end of story, no way. So working our way up from the bottom, just for
Yeah, I would
an
say that's a-
example, you'll see the next to the last line item of debt service, you can't cut that.
Yep.
I have a question on that, Mr.
So,
Terrazini. Could I end up asking that question?
If it goes in line with what he's trying to, yes.
He's talking about the debt. A news article went out, plus it was a thing saying that the actual monies that we went out for the bond was $12,195,000 at 3.426% for 25 years. I'd like to know how we got to the number in the budget, because it shows the actual amount for the year is $752,000 and change. I mean, I'd like to take and end up knowing how that number came about, because one of the things that we're able to end up doing is taking that same $12,195,000 and going to the state site and plugging that in to their calculator. And when you do that, at that percentage for that many years, it comes out to $733,990. That's $18,000 more. I think that's too high.
All right.
Unless there's a particular reason why, and it goes on from year to year. That's $752,825.
So globally, at the end of the day, it's frankly immaterial to the bottom line budget because it is debt excluded. Not that it's not important money, but any lowering of the payment of debt excluded debt lowers the income, which you raise from that debt exclusion. It has no impact whatsoever on the bottom line budget.
But why, I mean, I guess my question, two questions. We have never talked, this complete body has never talked about, even when we started bringing up percentages and everything, we never included the debt service in that. So we understood that. We understood that debt service was not something where we
Right.
could earn revenue, money back on it. My second question, so
So for the
Are the
bond issue,
are the figures right? Is it 700,000 or is it, are you saying it's 700,000 or it's 1.7 million for debt
No,
service?
I'm saying that the general bond that we went out for, the 12,195,000, at the percentage that was issued in the news release as well as to us, you plug that into the calculator from the state, and it comes out to, for 25 years, and it comes out to 733,000. That's $19,000 more. I'd like to know
Came off
why
the
that
bond
number is $19,000 more than the calculations.
it came off the bond schedule, and any online calculator cannot substitute for the actual amortization schedule prepared by the financial consultant and the bond holding.
Then can we have that? Can we
Right,
get
yeah,
that
so
document?
let's-
So, again, Mr. Chairman, we are 7 weeks in. This body's had this document for weeks.
Okay.
We have 2 weeks left to go. And I have to take some exception that this is the way we're dealing with things at the
Yep.
last minute.
All right, let's go back on
So,
with your route.
if I might, so for instance, on the insurance and
Calm down.
benefits.
You can't just yell at him for every single figure he throws out, okay, Will?
So for the insurance and benefits, the cuttable,
Got
what
the
I
note.
call the cuttable base is only about 730,000. Because when you look at it, you must pay the Worcester Regional Retirement System, you must pay your
Yep.
general insurance, your workers' comp. Please also remember that,
900?
The bottom.
Okay.
yeah, and
Again,
you
never-
guys do
we
kind of
never
a
thought
double
we would cover that.
accounting here. So instead of just keeping the debt over in the sewer fund and the light and the water, and then paying it directly from there, you pay it all out of the general fund and then get this reimbursement. So you have to remember, anything that's being reimbursed by the utility, were you to cut it, has a bottom line effect
understand what you're saying.
as well. Moving up to snow and ice, you can't cut anything out of that unless we can be guaranteed. It was a pretty light winter this year. We had a lot of luck.
Can I ask what the amount is? Because it shows in the budget to actual that we have underspent the 140,000, and now we're asking for 7,500 more than last year, and the budget actual, which is 2/3 through the year, we haven't spent but only about 70%.
Well, again, as I've tried to explain to the committee for 3.5 years now, relying upon the budget to actual has a number of limitations, including the fact that we run a cash-based reporting. We don't use an accrual basis of accounting. I get in my office weekly a report as to what that account is. As of this past week, it had a roughly $2,600 deficit, and there was another order of roughly $6,700 out there for materiel.
Snow and ice.
Snow and
Okay.
ice, that's right. So we reduced what we thought was gonna be a $50,000 or $150,000 in the first several drafts. We've been bringing that number down as we got through the winter, and I think our final number may have been the 7,500.
It is,
It may
I'm
have
just looking
been,
at it right here.
May have been $10,000.
Okay.
But relying on the budget to actual does have its limitations that we've struggled to get people to kind of accept.
Okay.
Moving up the way, for instance, fire and EMS, cuttable base 717. Please remember that between fringe benefits and fire and EMS, we put a $470,000 override in there last year. The idea of going back to the people and cutting those services on the back of that override, to me, seems
I understand what you're saying.
out of bounds. Moving up in the town clerk, we have a cuttable base, not of the 120,000 or so that we recommended. Please remember, you must mail out a census by statute. You must have elections.
Actually,
so-
what you have here is the the town clerk's budget for the census and everything else, and all her thing, it's actually gone down. It's gone down. Her actual budget, and this particular one, this is online, is $149.96. I like that, but it's gone down.
In the assessor's office, maintaining the vision software can't be cut. That's a requirement. In the treasurer collector's office, you have to mail the tax bills out. So I did a very high-level, quick and dirty, just walking through the line items and saying, okay, what can you absolutely no way in heck cut, to try to give you a sense of where this stands.
Yeah.
So when one
Statutory stuff.
So when one looks at it at just the highest level, before you even start getting into the nitty-gritty, you have a cuttable base of 4,000,009. If you're to try to cut $1 million, you're trying to cut 21%. Now, for instance, on the senior center, of that amount that was finally there, you have to remember approximately $60,000 is related to the MART program. So even if you cut the entire thing,
Is that so MART program must pay?
that's the a dial-a-ride for
Yep,
seniors
I
and
know what it
others.
is, but is it a must pay?
No, but you lose the grant. So you can't say, well, let's cut the whole thing, and we've saved 153. No, you've saved 93.
Yeah.
Same thing on the accounting, even if you cut the whole thing,
Well, as a senior,
you
I
have
look at,
the Hubbardston payment coming in. So the very first level would appear that you would have to cut 21% of the budget, with a number of the items remaining essentially out of bounds. So the idea that you could close the budget gap, I'm not saying you couldn't find 50,000 or 75,000, or with a little pain, perhaps 100,000. But I just wanted to give the committee the sense
So
of the gap that would
what I
have
wanted to
be
offer you,
closed.
when we were talking 5 and 8 and trying to, as the Mr. Kaplis had said, hey, I'm looking for some help. We're in trouble. We don't want to go back to our tax base to say that we need more. We're looking for recommendations. So this body thought through things, and we talked through, well, what if we do across-the-board cuts? It seemed to be what the soup du jour was for the federal government. It was on the news where you had department heads basically advising what they were gonna cut. So we looked at it from that perspective. So to drill down a little bit more, and personally, if we wind up going down a route where we're not on budget, and we have to go through, what was it, chapter 122? What's the default when the school goes into that?
The 112 budget?
Yeah.
112.
112. And that has effects on the town. My mind immediately went to, if we're operating in a deficit, this town has shut down services before. So that's basically the effect to the community. I started balancing, if I cut services, or we wind up collectively saying, hey, one of the options we have, we're gonna cut 8%. So we go through, and from the things that we can cut, we start lopping off services to say, at least this is a prescribed burn, rather than an emergency, shut the door, we have no money. That's where I came at it from we're trying to work out some kind of scenario, understanding that there were some that we couldn't touch.
I think
We didn't-
Tony's used the phrase, you can't just peanut butter spread it around.
Yeah.
That's right.
And he's spot on.
So we didn't have the level of visibility that you did, or that you're offering right now, to be able to say, I applaud your effort, but here's the reality. Here's what it would really need to be if you were to cut some things. Let's say you and I disagreed, or this body and you disagreed about some of those things where, hey, we're not gonna mail out this, or that part-time person's not gonna be able to assist that office of one. Those are kind of the deep, hard cuts where we say to the community, yeah, that was the that was the toughness that we actually had to go through. But I certainly look at it now as an exercise in good faith, but not really effective for what we're trying to do, which is find the pennies that we need to be able to come up with this, this issue right here.
And what I was trying to get to is just to give you, not to get into the nitty-gritty, because, your first pass was, well, maybe it's 8%, maybe it's 10%. And I guess what I'm trying to show you is it's closer to 20%. And then you add on what Mr. DeJoy said, which I thought he said it very well. You can't just peanut butter spread that across. So I just wanted to share that with you. We did email out to your chairman the step-by-step process, because it's not a 1/12 budget. It's not quite that. It's a 1/12 of what the commissioner thinks you need, or such higher amount as he shall determine. It's really quite an elaborate step-by-step, and we've laid that out in that memo, and hopefully you get a chance to look at that over the next
Yeah,
2 weeks or so.
I hope to. I really need to be able to understand it, because if we don't understand it, how are we gonna get the rest of the town?
Right, and so we're trying to move the selectmen and the school committee forward in terms of, putting forth what it is, because I think the school board recognizes that the town could not absorb $1 million in cuts also. So we have that email that went off to you today. We've given you kind of a glimpse of, it's not 8, it's 21% roughly.
Yeah,
And happy to
Just
talk
for-
with you over the next couple of weeks on that.
I appreciate that. And it just, as a summation, when we take a look at the total proposed operating budget of 9.6, call it 9.7 million dollars, number one, you cannot just cut 5% from the 9.6. That includes a lot of stuff. So what you've done is be able to say what you could cut if you really needed to would be the 4.9 million out of our OpEx. And then at that point, to earn the money that we need for the override to get us to an even keel would be, to get the 988, would be upwards of 20-something%.
Right, and this wasn't done at any deep dive. This was just done at, taking the elections out, taking the emergency reserve out.
We did the
some
same
of that
thing, we
kind.
just didn't look at some of the, we're not privy to some, or at least I'm speaking for myself, Will. We're not privy to some of the must-pays.
Sure.
We just took it as a generalization.
So I wanted to share that with you, just to
No, I
kind
think
of
that's good.
help give you a better understanding of where that's at. Now, the selectmen will have an agenda item. I did send to Jeff today. On the website is the request of the clerk and town council for arguments for and against the override. I've asked Jeff to circulate that out to whomever he might think be interested.
I saw it on
in
Facebook.
supplying
I've
one
asked
side or the
whoever
other.
posts that to please make it public so we can share it on our as well. So if it's not a public, it can't be shared to another town
You can go to the
page.
town's website.
Yep.
And just take the link.
Okay,
It's under the news and
all right,
announcements. or
we'll do that.
Town news. Click on that and you can just copy that hyperlink.
Does everyone understand that process? Because I'm not 100% sure that I understand what that process is.
So,
Share it on a page?
No. For what?
so if
Town
you go to the
council.
I
town,
don't know how to
No, with
do that.
what they're looking for, yeah.
so just for giggles, if you went to templetonma.gov and you click on, is anybody there?
I am,
Perhaps?
yeah.
Great. And you see the town news on the homepage.
It's that button right there, I
Oh,
think.
yes, okay,
And you
override.
see top left override button in the text.
Yes,
Okay,
town
so
council,
click on that.
okay,
Okay, now up in the address line, you see a very, very long internet address.
yep,
You simply copy all of that
Yeah,
in
I
its
get that.
entirety,
okay.
write your article, highlight the phrase you want, go to a hyperlink, you insert it, you're done.
But what does this process do? Town council requests for written arguments. What is that?
So
For-
town council has, the select board adopted Mass General Law, Chapter 53, Section 18B. That allows for the preparation and dissemination to every household that has a registered voter of a voter's guide. Think like the one that the Secretary of State does every year. It's on the, sort of newspaperish paper, it's red, and it gives a pro
Oh, I know
and
exactly.
a
what
con
that is.
side of the article. What does this mean? Maximum of 150 words. So town council, working with the town clerk, invites people to submit pro and con arguments. Everything that's submitted has to be maintained in the office of the town clerk for public inspection. Town council then takes those arguments and either selects one that he likes best or he compiles it. We have
That
nothing to do with
encapsulates
it.
the issue.
Exactly. He then sends that to the select board, which cannot amend it. Can't add, can't delete, can't edit it, nothing that can be done except to get it printed and mailed. That's their only role.
As a part of the voter guide.
It is the voter's guide.
Yeah.
So think voter's guide for the ballot, voter's guide at the annual town meeting. It is confusing because they're the same.
Which one
phrase.
gets that public comment for and against?
The election
Ballot.
ballot questions.
It's super good. I look for those for my kids, like my middle daughter just
Mm-hmm.
turned 18. So that's what I look for them at like 16 and 17, so they can start to read about it and
Right.
educate.
Right.
It's perfect. It's a great idea.
In this instance, because it is guided by the town clerk is considered to be perhaps less political or partisan than the select board's office. We've agreed that that should be distributed through her office. We did put a revised request, which I submitted as the chief financial officer for the community, in the box to address some of the questions Jeff had. Our estimates are there, and the like. So that started, and comments are needed by next Thursday, so that we can stay on schedule.
Okay.
Okay?
Anything else within the budget? Either you-
Unless there's a specific question, I think we tried to do a pretty good job of, I think Adam did a fairly good job of, what went up, what went down, why,
Okay.
what the impact was on the bottom line. Budget's still balanced. Of the last late additions, those were paid for, one by the town of Hubbardston, and one by a new state grant program. It's more of a cherry sheet.
That was a
item.
personnel inclusion.
Yep,
Okay.
yep. So they're essentially expense neutral at the end.
Okay.
That's the
And then there might have been a
full-time
Well,
account.
I do have
that they're
a
adding.
question on that.
small
There's
adjustment to the
$7,500 that's in our budget for that accountant. If you raise her salary by $7,500, that means that we will end up paying Worcester County retirement on that.
Yes, it does.
Where are we getting compensated for that?
The 3-year IMA has increases in it after the first year. The other thing that it does is we are woefully behind in most of our salaries on the range of 15 to 20%. The top range of a number of our salaries are actually lower than starting rate elsewhere. This is going to provide a number of pluses for us, including the ability to raise that salary, and we think improve our ability to retain
I
those
agree with you, but
professionals that we need.
I would say we need to be mindful of where we're sitting overall financial. If you're a citizen that may pay attention or come to town meeting or be very involved with it, it's always a tough year when you have debt exclusion or override.
It
So-
is.
So we have to be prepared to And I think you've just done that to say comparatively, if we're still paying people that have been here 10, 20 years at starting rates elsewhere, I follow you on that, but it's a sensitive subject.
It's a challenge, but they're effectively expense neutral.
I understand.
It's a 3-year grant, and we got
For that
them
position, yeah.
a $30,000 grant to pay for their software conversion. And I think that it has long-term potential in opening up other sharing opportunities.
I had asked earlier about getting the thing from Southwest or whoever you get the bond from, to take and see that document as for the debt exclusion as well as the $4 million, as to see what that is, because in doing the calculations, I don't come up with those figures that are in the budget.
What are you talking about? The debt?
Yes.
Let's take that offline, but I
Well,
agree.
if we can get supplied there, that'll answer the question about why it's at this number. I would like to know that.
If just email me a list of whatever questions the committee has. We'll do our best to get them to you expeditiously.
Okay. Does the committee need anything else from the town administrator or any other offices budget-wise?
Yeah, I'm just wondering why we cut 26% from the senior services last year to this year, from 207,000 to 152, almost 153,000.
Sure.
That's a lot of money. As a senior,
Well,
I'm
except for
concerned.
it isn't.
I mean,
Except-
I don't necessarily use that service, but I'm concerned about the other seniors.
Well, as we tried to explain, we had, up till a couple of years ago, run the MART as a revolving fund. So you never saw those expenses at all. The town expended the monies out of the revolving fund, and when the revenues came in, it covered it. A couple of years ago, we were advised, after discussions with DOR, it didn't look quite right to me. We talked with DOR, and they concurred that this was not an appropriate use of a revolving fund, and that we should carry it in a different manner. The manner that we chose to do that was in the operating budget. So we had upwards, I'd have to go back and look at the fiscal 19 budget, because we had to budget for the maximum that we expected to get. So it may have been as high as $150,000, give or take. We then budgeted all of that revenue. When we worked with DOR this last fall, they said, we're just not comfortable with that because you can't show us a history of getting $150,000 in grant revenues. And we explained to them the process that we'd gone through, and they said, okay, we're gonna let you do this one more year, but you need to tighten up the relationship between what you budget to spend and your historic levels of ridership and revenues. So yes, there was a cut on the expense side of the ledger, but we have to recognize, and that's where it's very important to drill down in the details and understand the relationship. We cut the revenue side as well. So at the end of the day, it was essentially neutral. Now, if one has an opportunity after this evening to look at, just bear with me one moment, please, page 197 of the budget book, this is the begin of trying to develop that history, that data. It's been said you can't manage what you can't measure. So this is the begin of that effort to look at histry
Yep,
and to
so this is
try
the
to.
Mart usage tab in your spreadsheets if you're using the spreadsheet to follow along.
And to then have those numbers drive the budget request, which drives the revenue request. So did we cut the budget 26%? Possibly. I'd have to do a side-by-side takeoff, but you have to remember the revenue dropped by an equivalent amount because ridership dropped. So you can't just say, well, you cut it by 26% without understanding and presenting the reasons for that.
Okay. resource-wise, is there anything else that the committee needs and will? If you have pointed questions, let's collect them in the interest of time. If you have specific questions that he can handle. Otherwise, Mr. Terenzini, I'm just gonna ask you if you wanna take the pepper questions, or if you wanna delay them, or have, collect them.
I'm happy to take them, if I could subsequently get them in writing, so I could give either, if you're happy,
I
fine.
agree.
Otherwise, I could respond in writing, because some I may wanna, or need to consult with the
Yeah,
department. head.
they're great questions, but I wanna be able to handle them and not in a laborious time right now. Should they be answered? Yes, but let's try in the interest of time to collect them. Will, do you have anything else?
Seeing that we had to put them in writing, I will end up deferring at this particular time so we can discuss it
Okay,
and put them in, and ask that in writing to the administrator.
okay.
So if we can get those by, let's say, Tuesday morning, we'll get on it when I'm back in the office Tuesday morning and turn them around as quickly as we can for
Okay.
you.
And I would expect that they are pointed questions like the $7,500 question, the Vadar question, although that was really on this body. We should have addressed that during the budget.
That's on this body. I mean,
I get
happy
it.
to do what you want.
But you understand that that's the nature of the questions that,
Sure.
that I'm expecting. And if anyone else has those, let's try and consolidate them and send them through either myself or Jeff.
Just so I make myself very clear to the administrator. I stated a number of times to this committee, I would like to have seen a compromise by the town as well as the school. Do I think we probably will end up with an override? Yes. Do I think it would be at the level it is? No. As long as we made cuts that would show the townspeople that there was effort made by both bodies to take and reduce the budget so that they don't see a large impact on their tax. Could we have lowered it to less than $1? I think so. I believe that there's enough in both budgets that they can reduce it significantly on both sides to get it down so that we are not paying over $1. It would be, from what I'm hearing from folks, is that then, now, whether they come to town meeting or not, they'll probably go to the ballot box. My concern was this: I don't want to end up having the town get into what we ended up going through a number of years ago when the school budget did not pass. We had another meeting. It was poorly attended by the people in Templeton, generally well presented by Phillipston, and the school went and said, okay, we're gonna end up holding to that $550,000. And that's when we had to make significant cuts, and we had to come back to the budget and actually ask for an override later on. And if it wasn't for the fact that we had to go, actually do that later in the year, we would have seen more cuts over a longer period of time. And I'm trying to avoid.
Yep.
You can't avoid that after the budgets are certified. I don't know how you can come to believe that you can start that conversation after the budgets are certified. The budget process started in earnest in January. We had a representative of the select board and tried to keep this body informed along the way, as well as our select board. The school did a terrific job, in my opinion, in our favor, in delivering a preliminary budget in mid-February. Unfortunately, not as many people were there as I would have liked, and they delivered a certified budget in mid-March, several weeks before the statute or the regional district agreement require. The time for those conversations was back then. We are where we are, and to think that after a budget's been certified and the warrant has been drafted, all of a sudden everybody's gonna say, yeah, you're right, let's tear it up, throw it away.
Well, we
and
actually
just
came into
fold our
that, we
cards.
actually came into that budget that year, and the warrant article was asking for more money, and the school committee, because they had gotten some additional state monies, actually reduced the amount that they wanted for their override.
Well, the
Clear
war
and
stories
simple.
of all the battles lost We haven't learned apparently from those, and I would put our budgeting process against any that have been used for effectiveness.
And
Happy to answer
Carter,
any
it's-
questions you put forward
And it's not over yet. The budget process ends.
at town meeting.
That's right. So, I got it. Let's move on to the next agenda item, please.
So we have given you the annual town meeting warrant. We are in the we're down to 33 articles at this point. One of them, the maker of 33, will not be making a motion to go forward with that.
Yep.
Any of the open issues with the sewer commission
Yep.
have been resolved
Yep.
at this point in time. We are preparing the voter information guide. We are now soliciting comments as to any additions, deletions, not deletions, that folks would have. I do have one from the moderator. Happy to consider any from this body in terms of finance terms. You'd like to add charts that may have been in the budget that you
Yeah.
think it would be
Do we
nice
have-
for people to see.
So you're saying that's in draft, or?
We've started the draft on it, yes.
Okay.
If you would like to make your recommendations as part of this, happy to do that
That's our
for
drop
you.
dead date for that.
But the drop dead is rapidly approaching. We're looking at roughly May 5, May 7 is pretty much our drop dead.
So if
Okay.
we had the pre-town meeting on the 2nd, we'd be able to get all the recommendations to the articles.
It sounds
for
like that.
Yeah,
That's
Yeah.
usually what we do.
Yep.
Say again?
I said that's usually what we do.
Yeah.
We stay that night until it's done on the
Yep.
2nd, and then
That would all go into the
everything
voter's
gets
guide.
written
And-
at
and
that time
I
and
think
submitted
that
the
worked
next
well
day.
at
Yeah.
the fall town meeting.
I agree with you 100%. I was about to say the same thing. I think that's been very effective and a useful drill for this body to be able to not only say it at the meeting, but to actually show it so people can actually read through it. More to your concerns, Will, about making sure that people are offered alternative points of view or ideas for difference. So we
So if
hear
there-
you on that.
If there are
May 5th.
questions on the warrant articles, the only big substantive changes since the draft before last, you may have seen, Article 2, the backfills dropped from 100 plus. By the time we were done, snow and ice is only about 10,000. Some of the others, we're dealing with the town accountant, the coverage for med leave there. We resolved some of our litigation. So that dropped up about $50,000. We did add the supplemental Article 3. We issued a request for letters of interest for cannabis growers, processors, and retailers. And we had the RFP out there for Baldwinville Elementary School, which I think Tony reported on your last meeting. So we've need about 17.5, we think, to move forward. There's sort of three things there. One is the sale of Baldwinville School to prepare those documents. It would be then voted on at the fall town meeting. Some possible zoning changes, and then what's called a host community agreement. Each retailer, cultivator, or processor has to enter into a host community agreement by which they recognize their responsibilities, and we speak to the impacts upon us and what revenues they would pay us to offset those impacts.
Okay, that's in the voter guide.
And that's all
I
gotta
think
be paid
people,
for.
discussions around town and otherwise, people will be hungry for that information to be able to be well-informed.
We're having a town council come out at this point. I think I gave Jeff this afternoon, I reminded him of the two dates. If you all have a date that you like better, because some of you might be able to be in attendance. That's gonna be on codification again, and we'll go through these warrant articles with council. So that's a new one. The other thing that's kind of, I'm not gonna say, we dropped the sale of the Baldwinville School completely, because we have much more work to do before the fall. And we had
You
to
haven't dropped it as an issue, you just dropped it from
drop
the
the
warrant.
article approving the sale, at the, annual town meeting, because we think there's a lot of work to do, given the proposal we got to get it ready for the fall. The only other really substantive change is we had some title problems, I think we told people about on the parcels that we're selling to the state. So we can't just sell them the parcels. We first have to quiet title to one of the parcels, then we sell them both of the parcels, and we use the proceeds to pay the costs of quieting the title on the first parcel. That, you do a taking against owners unknown, and you have to escrow the money. And if an owner does show up and we never really owned it, they get the money, we don't. But in general, we don't anticipate that, so at the end of the second year, that portion of the costs gets released to us. I think for the most part, everything else is stuff that's been talked about or touched upon throughout the budget process. So I'm happy to answer any questions about it or how we're preparing to proceed. But I do think, except for those highlights, sewer budget went up a little bit. They hadn't included some
For their
things.
capital?
And their capital doubled
Yeah.
from 40 to 80.
I was shocked, I was surprised that it jumped that much. I thought that they had put their due diligence and effort into getting the quote. So I was a little bit surprised that it jumped by what it did. But I also remembered that their retained earnings are basically paying for that capital item, and they're in a good place.
Yeah,
with
we
their
we
retained
were
earnings.
perhaps a bit more skeptical than you of the number, and that's why we had encouraged and offered to assist Mr. Machete when he was in here
Yep.
on that Saturday. And after he had an opportunity to reflect upon it, he came back to us and
Okay.
asked to
Was
to
it
double
design
that.
change, or was it the actual vendor giving a better, I mean, we don't need to go into it because it's really not,
I think it was primarily the difference between more of a street public
Than
works
shoring up.
kind of guy looking at the job, as opposed to, I think the first guy who looked at the job may have been described to the capital committee as somebody who'd done a driveway for him or something along
yes,
that line.
yes.
And I think it was just somebody who had a different sense of the scope, the weight of the trucks, the impact of the turning
Yep.
movement, and some of that.
Okay.
And had perhaps, hopefully, a touch more experience with wage rate. Wage rate will drive the cost of that project 30%, 40% easily,
Okay.
even everything else being equal.
Yep. I don't have any questions on the warrant, but if there's any other committee
do.
members,
At one time, there was a warrant article concerning the advisory bylaw. Is that under codification?
No, it is not.
That's been withdrawn?
Again, we've got two bodies that kind of talk past each other. And I never got a clear signal from my board to include that change. I asked them on several occasions. I think that, I would like an opportunity to come in and sit down and explain, some of the changes I think that you've proposed that were different than ours. I think council and I have looked at them, and with a mild tweak are very easy to accommodate. Some of the others are problematic operationally, and I don't know that the committee necessarily understood what working under those rules would mean. And we would like an opportunity to come back and say, well, here's what that means on the ground, and then get this back in front of the select board and this body, deal with it in the fall. In the meantime,
Okay.
we're prepared to move forward as is. It is not in the codification.
The reason I
tried
ask that
to
is, if you look at the codification document
Well, he
online,
wasn't
it's in
finished.
draft, and that's still in there. The advisory bylaw.
I'll go back and look. It should not be.
It's in
That's,
the- I don't see the final, it's only in draft, and I don't see the final codification document.
well,
I don't
we
understand
have
what
town
you're saying.
council coming out. We've offered this committee 2 dates in case they'd like to be there. I will circle back to him and make sure that there have not been any of those changes from the 2018 annual town meeting.
I'm a little
That's not
confused.
our intent.
What, could you please explain what your question is? I don't.
Well, they had a warrant article for changing the advisory bylaw.
Correct.
It's no longer there.
Got
But
it.
in the
That I
in
tracked.
the codification document, on the draft, on the town website, it's still there, of changing the bylaw.
Well, they're gonna take it out. It's just draft.
Okay, that part I understood, so I think
But
we
I
can
understood it
proceed.
was going to change. My understanding is, and this is verbiage that I've heard, that they will end up having a final codification document.
Yeah,
But it's not there yet.
right. There's a meeting, is it the 30th?
Well, we've offered the date of April 30 or May 7, in case members of the advisory committee would like to be there, so that we can accommodate that.
Right.
But we're, again, running out of time to have folks tell us.
Oh, I thought the meeting was the 30th.
No,
I think that's maybe something we were supposed to talk about tonight.
we have
Was
spent
that on
a
the?
great
I
deal of
honestly thought the
time.
meeting was the 30th. I have it written down and everything. I
We
was
have
like,
spent a great deal of time trying to make sure people have documents, they have access to information, and that we're being as receptive as possible to adjusting things where we feel we can. Happy to arm wrestle you where we think we can't, to try to move forward in a cooperative manner. And if the April 2018, May 2018 changes are there, and it may be as simple as they haven't been posted, we'll get that reposted and dealt with at the meeting in late April, early May, because that is not our intent. We've tried to make sure that anything that was more than a comma, a tweak, a renumbering, a reference to statute was in these fairly lengthy, you'll notice the trench bylaw, there's only about 4 changes in it, but we've used 4 pages in the warrant to do that. So I'll go back in and happy to take a look at that.
Under, after Mr. Terenzini has departed, we can address what our way forward is under member comments, because it's not a budget item otherwise. We can just deal with it under member comments.
My suspicion is that somewhere, the second draft of this, Mr. Spring is correct that this contains the initial draft that was released some months ago. There is a second draft, and somehow, between 2 of the staff members, that revised draft did not get updated. We will make sure that happens within the next few days.
Okay.
And send out to the committee notice that that has been done.
You good?
That's why I asked it,
Okay.
to see what's in it, because it was still there.
Okay.
Again, Mr. Chairman, the sooner we can get these questions with some clarity behind them, the sooner we can get you answers.
Understood. All right. So, based on the rest of what we've got tonight, I don't think you had anything else that, was there anything else
Not really.
that Jeff had requested more clarification or questions on?
No,
We talked
we-
about the budget, we talked about the warrant.
We've sent you a revision for the transfer that comes through on my signature as Chief Financial Officer for the community. If the committee chooses not to proceed on it, then we'll deal with it in some other fashion.
What
But
are you
they-
talk, what are
They
you
no
talking about?
longer come in under department head signatures
Transfer for what?
from the AC, from the advisory committee's reserve.
Okay,
That will be at your next meeting.
okay. Does the board have any other questions for Mr. Terenzini?
No, thank you.
Thanks for
coming.
stopping and.
No problem.
I appreciate it.
Anytime.
Okay.
Have a good evening, folks.
Thank you too.
Okay, next item that we've got on our agenda, go ahead and grab your copies of the reserve fund policy.
Mr. Chairman?
Yeah.
I'd like to take and table that until we have a full committee to take and talk about the changes, because that way there we'll have
Okay.
some input.
Yep.
Do you want that as a motion? I'll make that a motion that we table the discussion on the reserve fund policy.
I'll second.
Any discussion why we shouldn't address it right now?
No, this isn't, because this wouldn't be enacted for right now anyway. We're looking at this to be enacted in the fall, right? Is it something that has to go to town meeting?
No,
No.
no, this
So it's
is,
just for the board?
it's just
Yeah.
for the board.
So waiting is just, it's not gonna change this year's budget proposal or anything, it's just to
It
wait?
changes, it doesn't change the present policy that we have.
Right, so then I'm for waiting, I
Okay.
think that's fine.
We can make changes throughout the year for any of our policies, and all we're doing is I'm trying to make sure that we have
Yes.
input for everybody on the committee.
Yeah.
I agree, I
think
believe
we're
that the
getting a
people
pretty good-
meeting, the
yeah.
people missing will wanna be a part of that.
Yep. I think that the tighter grip that we have on what policies we're gonna have, how we're actually making recommendations, and then how they're gonna appear on the website, we're getting a much tighter grip on that, so that's good. On the motion that has been seconded to table the discussion for the reserve fund policy proposals, how do you vote, Amy?
Voting to table, yes.
Voting to table. Deb?
Yes.
Will?
Yes,
And I vote as well. And that vote passes at 808, or 2808.
I'm writing it in military time.
You know it. So we've tabled that.
We do.
Pre-town meeting date, as an agenda item. I think we've kind of talked that one already to say, in order to get our input into the voter's guide, he gave us a drop dead of May 5th. May 2nd is our first meeting.
Yeah, I mean, we're gonna have to do it, we're gonna have to stay till it's done.
I agree.
I would like to take and see that also, but I would like to take and see us meet before that time to take and talk about the budget and what we discussed about the budget here. Because if we go into pre-town meeting, we got 30-something articles, and to go through the budget, and if we make some changes to the budget, as I proposed, then we need to take and have that done before we go to pre-town meeting, so that we can end up making a substitute motion, or actually put this out for the voter's guide at that particular time, and saying, this is our recommended budget. Just as I said, we, by Mass General Law, says that the recommended budget, we don't create one, the recommended budget, we go through the budget and make recommendations as to yes, no, higher, lower, or whatever. We agree, we disagree with what was presented to us.
Let me ask you, can I ask you a question real quick?
Yep.
So, you were not at the Saturday session where we sat and we
That's
listened to
correct.
the department heads. In the past,
Yep.
would that have been a place where you would have raised those questions? So this would have all been done afterward anyway?
No, this would have been done by this advisory committee prior to that. It was a joint meeting of the two boards. I didn't oppose that. I thought that might end up having fresh members. Unfortunately, I could not end up coming to that meeting, or else I had a lot of questions. I still have a lot of questions about this whole budget. As you heard, I brought up a
Right.
number of things. Do we want to go into this coming annual town meeting and present this budget that the administrator has without our input. And we're tasked with it. We're tasked with making our recommendations, regardless of whatever he ended up saying. It's our task to go through the budget and make recommendations, whether it's line by line or by account number. We haven't done that. I brought this up a number of times to everybody to take, and I have not said, anybody's said, we disagree with that. It's just been flat. We've done this before. I've gone through this before. We actually went, but department by department, asking those questions. I had a question as an example.
But we
Emergency
did that
management-
on that Saturday. We asked clarification.
Did you
And
ask why he wants?
If you have questions, when are you gonna ask those questions? I mean, you threw them at Carter tonight, and he was able to, calmly go through them, but if you have questions, you gotta put them together, because we can't address them as a committee if you're not gonna bring them up.
I have brought
We
up-
rely on your experience to
I
ask
have
those
brought up some of
questions.
those questions prior.
Okay,
I mean, you.
a question hangs open
And he said
until we get an answer.
we had 6 weeks to take and end up doing this. No, we haven't really had this budget since the 10th. There was additional items put on the selectmen budget for, annual town and, a fall town meeting, basically a voter's guide. It was never in that book. You may have had that book in February, but that wasn't in there. How are you gonna vote on it if you don't go line by line? That's what I wanna know.
Vote
How-
on what?
How could you vote to take and end up saying that it's okay to take and end up putting almost another over $1,000 into the selectmen's budget for those 2 items? And it wasn't in the book.
No,
Okay, you
it
had the
wasn't.
book, you looked at it, it was actually at that meeting, everybody went through it, but it didn't appear until we got this budget on 4/9. I mean, actually, we got it on 11. It was a day late. They were supposed to have that to us on the 10th. If they had done it on the 10th and said, this is our budget, and sent it that night, they would have complied by the bylaw. They broke the bylaw again.
Well, if we had been at the select board meeting, we would have received it at the meeting, because they signed it at that meeting. Because they went over that at the meeting before.
Electronically, you got it, plus you had all the paper copies?
No. What I'm saying is, if we had been at that meeting, we could have stood there, watched them sign it, and they could have made a copy for us. If we had been there. I was at the select board meeting, and they said that's when they were gonna do it. That was their meeting date. That was when they had the time to do it. They were gonna do it, and the town administrator and the select board
Here's all
and the
change-
administrator.
Here's all the changes,
Right,
Amy.
but they said that if we had been there, we could have received it there, and that they were gonna get it out to us as soon as possible. I don't know, I didn't go to that meeting, I don't know how late it went, but they did it the very next day, but the business was done at that meeting, and it legally was done on the 10th. I believe that they did
Oh, I didn't
the
say they
best
didn't do, they
could.
didn't pass the budget, but
Yeah.
they're supposed to have it to us on the 10th.
Well, I think
Which they could have sent us the electronic copy
they
that
certainly
night.
could have, however, if we had been here, if any one of us could have been here and received that, we could have hung around and waited and gotten paper copies right there and right then.
I mean, I'm looking at the paper copies we just got tonight, and I see nothing on the select board for the annual town meeting things. Nothing. I got copies of it.
These are revisions, though.
Right. Revisions.
Right, so if you wanna, these are changes to the sheet, so if you want the,
So on the 11th, we got changes. When we received this on the 11th? Okay, fine, it was a day late. I'll pass that over.
Okay.
Our next meeting is when? Today.
Right.
Today. This is the first time you're getting to take and see some of the changes that were made that night. This is why I said that we should meet last week. Some folks said, no, I want to get it and digest what's in there. Have you all gone through there and gone through the BVA? I have, and I have a lot of questions on it now. I mean, this is,
Well, I mean,
this is my whole
I
point.
would- I would just collect your questions so we can, submit those, whether we get an answer or.
This is why I wanted to go through and talk about my questions and say, here it is, and pass, I mean, I may have the question, but I wanted to take and throw it out to all the committee and see where everybody was. If we had a vote that said, okay, let me bring up emergency management again. And I would bring it up and say, that's 750. And we had a discussion, and we said, okay, that's too much. And we voted on it and changed it. Or the board, I'm the only one that thought it was too high. Okay, that's fine too, but we at least had a chance to look at it and discuss it. We have not done that. In fact, my question is a pallet of water, $300. Do you know that the state in Framingham has water for the entire state, emergency management? In this community, if we had an emergency, we could go to them? Why are we spending $300 in this town at this particular time? When we have the emergency,
Yeah,
and-
I
and-
can
and
answer,
we
I
need
can
the
answer
money-
that, but Will,
yep,
the emergency management also covers the volunteers, the CERT team, CERT. They participate, and I can't even tell you, it's more than I can count on one hand, but they participate in several events in a year. They do the Mac and Cheese Fest. They do, anytime the town winds up saying, hey, we've got traffic control issues because we're having a town event, they're able to touch a
Even
truck. Graduation, the CERT team comes and they participate in that.
Okay.
That's not like a documented, the select board declares a state of emergency and we wind up pulling on NEMA for other things. If they wanted a pallet of water, I was following you on the price for it, but if they want a pallet of water because they're basically making sure that they have their assets to start that fiscal year, and that they're able to cover all these different things, to say, hey, we're gonna bring a case of water down to support the Mac and Cheese Fest for our people out of the back of the truck. That's what that item is for, not,
okay. They have $1,000 in this year's budget and they haven't spent a cent. You had macaroni and cheese already.
yep.
Why didn't they buy water? They had
might have-
$1,000.
They might have already had it. I cannot answer your question for that. But I can say procedurally,
I'm not,
you're upset because you've got questions and you feel like we're getting snowed into basically getting this budget rammed down our throat.
yep,
So we do have the budget process and we're watching, we're participating all the way through it. We still have our final card to play, which is our recommendations.
okay.
I can tell you, based on what you've said tonight, if we've got questions and we need to have some kind of fidelity and reconciliation for all the different changes that it's made, we have to come prepared for May 2nd, so we're not spending 6 hours saying, hey, this is how we're gonna rework this entire budget. I think we need to come prepared to say, our recommended budget changes the following things and will receive a net gain of, I don't know, a feasible number. $20,000.
How are
You
you
think
gonna-
you could gain
How can you do that?
$20,000?
Tell me how you're gonna end up doing that. Going through and changing numbers in the budget without this type of document that I have here.
But I just have a question, because here's the thing, if you're suggesting that we go through department by department, line by line, to find those changes and question them, that means pulling every single department head back in here and asking them to defend that, because
could-
I don't feel that, hang on, I don't feel that it would be right. I mean, we had them, I was at the meeting where they all came and they explained what their budget was, why they had those things in there. And I wouldn't be comfortable then just making up a number and saying, well, I don't think you need this, I think you need this, particularly for me, because I might not understand exactly what's behind the number. But they were here and I had that opportunity to ask them. So that whole process of going through everything, like, I wouldn't feel comfortable just changing those budget numbers at this point unless we were literally gonna
And-
set up another
and
meeting
I said to
for
this committee-
8 to 10 hours
Well, let
and
her
bring them
finish.
all back in here.
Yep.
And I don't know that that's feasible to do at this point.
I
don't
understand,
think we
I
can.
understand that, but right early on in this budget process, I ended up saying time and time again, we should have each department head come in. The rest of the committee, as a whole, you chose not to do that.
Right.
so we couldn't ask those questions. You didn't ask enough questions at that Saturday, as far as I'm concerned. I watched that.
Yeah, but I'm my own
and
person.
I'm not saying you didn't ask
Will.
questions.
I was satisfied with how they're going through it. You come to this board with a host of different experiences and otherwise.
Yep.
I do too. I've been on a federal budget person for many years. So when they sat here and I sat over there, I asked a ton of questions based on that.
I didn't ask you to say that you didn't.
But I want to go back to Deb's point.
Yeah.
So I absolutely think it would be fruitless to start dragging them in here to do that. However, if I'm not going to go through it, I'm satisfied with a lot of these different things. If I had pointed questions, like I asked Carter tonight about, that's a grant-funded person. I didn't like adding a person, but he said it's a negative or a neutral ad. Carter went through and he had, and make sure that I get the terminology right, a sum disallow.
Yeah.
That was him, look, no matter what that department head said, Carter went through and did a sum disallow. I don't see it any different if we went through the same way. I'm not gonna go back to them and say, re-justify your
No, I didn't
51
say that
account.
we-
I would just say, this body is basically saying, nice budget, we're recommending less. We think that, hey, advisory committee, we're thinking you can do without Vadar. We know you didn't use it, so we're actually gonna put that on our revised budget to say, we're pulling that from it. That's the way it would have to happen at this point in the game, time-wise. Should that happen? I don't know. That's why I was basically saying, we've got 7 members on this board. Will, if you came back and said, here, based on the answers to all my questions, here are the things that I have wrong with this budget. We all have to vote on that and say, you know what? That item, he's 100% right. This is how we think we should change that warrant article. If that pisses off the town administrator because it's a fly in his ointment in terms of how the budget has gone through this level of scrutiny in the budget process, so be it. That allows ultimately the townspeople that we're expecting to finalize this whole budget action, knowing that we have the budget election or the election for the override as well. But it puts it to them to say, here's the recommendation from that went through the budget process. Here's the advisory board's recommendation based on its due diligence. Does that kind of encapsulate what your
Well,
thought
we have to
process
take,
is?
to me, you'd have to go through all of these and say, okay, on the BVA, is some of this justified? And if it's not, you cut it, or in some cases, there should be stuff that's added.
What account is this?
I just have it on this particular one.
Right, but if you motion to it, I'm all for what you say. I support you as a member on the board. I absolutely do. If you wind up having, like questions or whatever, I want to make sure that we address them and follow all the decorum that we do on this board. If it doesn't fit within the process, then we've got a problem. We have to agree going forward as a committee to be able to do these things. What we have right now is this budget process, and we have to follow it. Do we still have some of the methods to be able to address some of these things that you're bringing up? Absolutely. It may not be Carter's wish that occurs, but it allows us to execute our duties the way that you're laying them out to say, hey, I've told you a million times, committee, but this is the way that we should be executing this budget. So, we're talking about pre-town meeting date. I think that we need to become prepared to talk in depth with that budget, but not willy-nilly. We've got to come prepared, whether it's questions or otherwise answered at that point, because we're going to make our recommendation that night.
I could entertain a workshop for next week, for the in-between week, not a meeting, just a workshop, so that we don't need quorum, and it will give everyone an opportunity to come forward and say, I got a problem with this, I got a problem with that. But the questions, the real things, have to be submitted to the TA. Like, they have to be written and submitted electronically to the town administrator right away. I will say I don't have like a ton of questions. I feel like we're between a rock and a hard place. I don't really like the budget. I don't see any place where we can, as an advisory committee, say, cut it,
Yeah.
get rid of it. We are up against the wall. I don't like a tax raise any more than anyone else does. I live in this town too, and I
But I'm
don't
trying
see
to
a way
take it
around
up-
it.
Making a good faith effort
I was
on
about to-
cutting some
yeah.
stuff out of there and tell the people, we went through this and we saw these items that we felt were not necessary and should be cut. To end up taking a part-time employee and make them full-time, do you agree with that?
I mean, I can't say I don't work in that department. I feel like what we're gonna end up doing is, like, it's like when you give someone a 5-cent discount. It's really gonna be so trivial.
Well, we're coming up against another issue that has always been a sore subject with a lot of people, not only me, is that we have a district school thing, or, excuse me, not a district,
Region.
but the dispatch.
Okay.
And time and time again, if you talk about that dispatch, we're dispatching for Phillipston. Are we getting compensated according to what we should? A lot of folks don't think so. The same thing is going to happen with the accountant working for Hubbardston. I've heard comments already from people about, if she wants to work for Hubbardston, let her go there and work and let them pay, and not sit in our office here and we pay another $7,500 in her salary.
What service are we getting out of that?
What's the benefit to us?
I'm asking you.
I don't see any benefit to us. The only benefit that we're seeing here is the benefit of having Hubbardston have an accountant sitting here doing their business.
All right, so let's,
So,
So then
in
let's-
in doing that,
let's-
it means that you're going to have a person that's part-time go to full-time. On our dime, folks.
so, agenda items for the next one, for our May 2nd, is gonna be the warrant.
We're not gonna have time for anything else.
No, yeah, you'd just be doing
Okay,
that.
so the workshop is basically just gonna deal with budget stuff.
Right.
For the second, the only thing that you discuss is the warrant.
Okay,
All the warrant articles. You go in, have a discussion on those warrant articles. Some of the
What's-
stuff with the
what's next
budget
Thursday?
should have already been done.
The
And
25th.
by the way,
Yeah.
it can't be done in a workshop per se, because in a workshop, you can't vote on it.
know.
You can say, and I don't agree.
what I'm saying is, I don't wanna talk about it tonight, because we've already spent.
Okay, I'm not,
Yeah.
I'm just saying, what
I
the
hear you.
process is, if we were to take and end up talking the budget next week, and just one night,
Yeah.
talk about it, if it's a workshop, I don't agree with what the selectmen did, the consensus is this. I don't care how you look at it, that takes and works around the open meeting law. It's, consensus to me is a vote.
What?
What are you
No,
talking
I
about?
think, my understanding was that we could do a workshop to hammer everything out and then potentially come up with a document like this and vote on it on May 2nd, because then it would be part of the warrant.
That's why I got that one page I came up
Right.
with, and it showed, the one thing I wanna take and end up showing all the folks out there, not only the upper level for a department, but in the accounts, what's under that account? If somebody asks what's under that account, if we have it on a,
We can work, but see,
No
we
way,
can work
no
all that
way.
out at the worksheet, at the workshop.
you're gonna get questions. I'm telling you, you're gonna get questions
That's
already.
fine.
With,
I think we can work on as much of that as possible at a workshop, because no voting needs to happen for that.
I have to say, I support all of the department heads that came in here and had their due diligence to try and explain all that stuff.
I agree.
So, Will, I get what you're saying in looking through and trying to identify those line items, but I trust what they have, for all of the questions that we had for it. on your subject of due diligence, we did. We spent a whole last meeting trying to find new revenue, being able to, the first portion of what Carter was here for was to talk about what if we cut the budget? And we went through that in the community
Well, I didn't
members.
go for the can, you know, the peanut butter effect of everything. This is why I'm saying the peanut butter effect is not gonna work. Showing some level of cuts in the budget, going through this process actually shows people that you did something.
Okay.
The peanut butter effect could be disastrous, could be good for one department and disastrous for another.
Sure, it could.
Anybody who's watching these meetings knows that we're not doing anything. They hear us discuss these things. They've seen us at meetings. I think it would be remiss to say that the people that watch these are assuming we're doing nothing, even if we don't present an alternate budget. Is there a real harm in saying we're in line with the Board of Selectmen on this because there's no other line to be on? We can't go through and peanut butter spread and cut everything. So is there a real harm in saying we're residents just like you?
And
We've
you're not-
sat and we've thought about it and we've looked at these numbers.
Right, but then you're not doing your job as recommended in your Association Town Finance book. It says that you should be going and doing this.
Okay, so.
I mean,
Okay.
if this
Pre-town-
committee chooses not to do that,
Okay.
then we're not doing our job. That's
Okay.
all I'm gonna
All
end
right,
up
well,
saying.
All right, so pre-town meeting date is 2 May. We
We
got
have
the
to-
warrant, we'll put the warrant on the agenda.
We have to vote on it. I know May 2nd was discussed, but we need to vote on it. So I'll make a
Okay.
motion that we should hold our pre-town meeting on May 2nd.
Okay?
I'll second.
Okay, a motion to hold a town meeting has been made and seconded. Any
Pre-town meeting.
discussion? Pre-town meeting.
We may end up, because of the time limit, it may be advantageous that they can end up moving that to another date.
What, 2 May? Up or back, or,
Because he's already presented us with some dates that town council is coming. The 30th is one date,
Right.
which is too soon before the
Yeah,
second.
but we also talked about having a workshop basically meet again next Thursday.
Yep.
So if we had a workshop next Thursday, does that basically take care of what
That
you
will
just
take care
said?
of the budget. That won't take care of any discussions that you want, questions that you have on the warrant articles.
But, what-
We can't ask questions at the pre-town meeting on the warrant articles?
You can, the only way you can end up doing that is have the administrator and whoever's department is brought in that question, you can end up having them come in. Or the
So-
selectmen. What has happened in the past is, they have not necessarily come.
So where we're under such a time crunch,
Yep.
I mean, we have the warrant because they've given us copies.
Yep.
Can we submit through Jeff? Like if we say by next Wednesday, anyone who has questions on anything in the warrant, submit them through Jeff so that we can get maybe answers if we submit it by Tuesday or Wednesday and we're meeting Thursday for the budget. I mean, so if we have the answers to any questions, like basically I'm saying, let's submit our questions in writing, get the answers so that when we're talking at the pre-town meeting, we have answers to our questions. Because
You
if
still might have questions that can't be answered, and the only way they can get them answered is if you have the administrator, selectman, or somebody that's putting in the, well, in the.
when is that occurring?
On the second. Your pre-town meeting's on the second.
Right, for us.
Right.
So that Tuesday, we're doing that. So you're saying the only way to get some of those answers is to talk to town council, right? Is that
No,
what you?
no,
The TA.
town administrator
And the Board of Selectmen.
and board of selectmen, or somebody that's got the warrant article that's submitting it.
Okay.
So we can invite
Yeah,
them to
that's-
the pre-town
We're
meeting.
kind of talking in a
Generally,
circle
that's-
right
They
now.
want, if they come or not, we can't control that.
If you had a question right now, there's a method to basically get an answer for that, so that you come prepared at
Pre-town meeting.
pre-town meeting.
That's what I'm saying. So if we have questions now, we're better off submitting them to the TA in writing or the Board of Selectmen in writing so that we can work to get the answer before the pre-town meeting.
Sure.
I mean, if we
Or
still
go
don't
to the
have
next-
an
Go to next
answer,
Wednesday's town meeting,
Board of Selectmen.
Board of Selectmen meeting and ask a question
His-
there.
His,
You know, wait, Phil.
okay,
Phil, Will.
yep,
We have questions, we have from now until next week and then the week after that, because it sounds like we're gonna meet both Thursdays before that, or all Thursdays before that. If someone has questions, either we were gonna ask, Carter tonight, or you have them to ask them, just ask them. I don't understand what we're arguing about, what you're arguing about.
well, I'm
If you
I'm
have a
discussing
question-
it,
If you have a question,
yep,
how do you believe that you can get an answer to your question?
by us coming to this meeting, bringing that question, and having the chairman present those questions to whoever the party is that we need an answer from, whether it be.
That's the only way we could get an answer to your question?
That's
If you-
the way-
If you,
That's
if you
the
singularly,
process
you're
that's
not
been
asking
That's the,
all of us.
that's the correct way to do it.
that's the process, it sounds like that's always
That's a
been the
process.
process. But in the interest of time, can we submit them in writing? If we don't get an answer by, say, the end of next week, then we put the invitation out to say, listen, we want answers to these questions, we'd like you to be at the pre-town meeting.
Okay, let me-
Again,
let me ask-
And either Carter, Adam, one of,
Somebody.
yeah.
Let me ask you this, is if you submit a question, are you gonna submit it just say if you had a question for the TA, you submit the question to the TA, that's the only person you're gonna end up having on copy?
No.
I mean, if you're trying to catch us in an open meeting law violation,
Yep,
I would strongly caution that that we don't do that.
that's,
We need, if a question gets presented, it has to be given back in open forum, or at least presented for whatever,
exactly. So you can't end up sending it out and copying everybody, because now everybody, once they,
if you have two-way communication,
Yeah.
it's bad.
right, two-way community. Now, if you end up
More than two, it's
one-on-one,
bad.
that puts the
That's
burden on that one individual to think and end up coming. You can have you can have the TA come and answer it for everybody. So the answer is for everybody, all at the same time in an open forum.
So.
That's the correct way to do it.
If we set our pre-town meeting for May second and invite the TA and the members of the Board of Selectmen to come,
We
Does
better have
that-
questions for them.
does that satisfy what you're looking for?
That would give you.
Somebody that could
That
answer
doesn't
the question.
necessarily mean you might have questions at that particular time on every article. You could get a better explanation of it. One of the things that is bantering about, and everybody's been, it was forwarded to us all, is that they're not going to read all the warrant articles.
Okay, hang on.
Town meeting time says if you're not gonna read the warrant articles, then everybody has to have a copy of the warrant.
What does that have to do with what we're talking about right now, Will?
We're just voting, can we vote on the date for the
We're,
pre-town
we're,
meeting?
we're within a motion right now for the May 2nd. We're in discussion of the motion that you proposed
But we're
and,
talking about
Amy.
the warrant and questions. Okay?
yeah, but you went off and talked about whether it was, all the things were gonna be read we're talking about pre-town meeting and getting
Yep.
answers for this body to be able to accurately vote on, or not vote on, make recommendations on.
Okay.
So that's what we're talking about right now. The motion's been made and seconded. Is there any further discussion for having our pre-town meeting on May 2nd? Hearing no further discussion.
I'd like to see it on a different day, maybe a little bit later, because we have the town council coming, but having him
On
come,
the 30th?
having him, no, the 30th
No,
would be too
later,
early.
you're saying.
Having them come on the,
So,
what's it proposing, the 7th?
the 30th or the 7th?
We had looked at the dates before for when our pre-town meeting was gonna be, and I remember a discussion where May 2nd was like the end of the limit. We really only have a couple more days.
No, we got to the 15th. We have, the town bylaw calls for us to end up having our recommendations 2 days before.
Well, the town meeting's the 15th, so we don't have until the 15th.
We have until the 15th, 2 days before, so you back that up
So
2
the
days.
13th.
You're talking about till the 13th.
So we have 2 calendar days or 2 business days? I'm
would be either
confused.
2 days.
If we want them to go in this printed voter guide though, if we want our input to go in the printed voter guide, we only have until the 5th.
Which the 4th is Saturday, the 5th is Sunday.
Right, that's what Carter just said. He said the 5th and then he said no, the 7th, because obviously the 5th is a Sunday, so.
Okay.
If we don't have if we don't have the meeting on the 2nd to talk about this, then there's absolutely no chance anything we say will be printed and added in with what the other recommendations are in the guide
Well,
for the
what
town
we
meeting.
have done in the past is this committee have made their recommendations, printed our own, and handed those out at town meeting. So
we have
it's
that
a
in our
case of
budget for
whether
this
it's
year?
whether it's on the warrants that are handed out or the town meeting guide is something that can happen, but it doesn't necessarily mean that it has to be in there.
I think that the committee winds up being viewed as not a part of the process if we start doing our own thing. If we're included within the voter guide, that to me says that there's been, like a functional process and that we've made our
Okay,
time.
here's a question for you. The last time we ended up going through this process, there was some yays and some nays. It was like 4-3
Are you talking about the fall town meeting?
at
Last year.
at the annual town meeting last year. They put in, the advisory recommended. It should be put down as to what the actual vote was, and we've had that in the past.
We did that in the fall. In the fall, we had a count.
We did have a count?
We did have a count,
Okay.
because I remember
Because-
the chairman writing it down.
Will,
One of
Will,
the
can you make
things
a
we could-
recommendation that, we're in a discussion of a motion right now. You said that you wanted something prior to the 2nd of May. Would you please make
No,
either
I'm
a
not
count?
looking for something prior to the
I
second.
want something
You want
after
it
the
after.
2nd.
I want to get in the voter guide.
I do
Then-
too.
Then move the question.
I'm not gonna, I want to vote on the question.
That's what I'm saying, move the
Yeah.
question.
Okay. On the motion to have the pre-town meeting with the advisory committee on May 2nd, what is your vote? Amy?
Yes.
Deb?
Yes.
Will?
Yes.
And I vote yes as well. Do we want to have a workshop on the 25th to talk budget? I don't think that's a bad idea at all, Amy. Will, and well, does someone want to make a motion to have it?
I will. I'll make a motion that we hold a workshop for the purpose of discussing the budget in its entirety to the satisfaction of the members of this committee on Thursday, April 25th at, what, 6:30?
I'll second that.
Okay. So we have a duly made motion and seconded to have a workshop addressing the budget issues. Discussion. Will, I want to make sure that we're addressing everything so the entire body moves forward. If we need to go through some level of granularity, I'm all for it. I think it's gonna be, I think it's good.
As an example, we could end up going through line item by line item, by account number and saying, okay, does everybody agree with the amount that the administrator has? It's either yes or no.
Right.
And move it into our column. That shouldn't take us days and days and days. We either agree or we don't agree. If we don't
But
agree,
it's an exercise to try, as you had said, to show some,
right,
some due diligence to the community so they see that the advisory committee is going through to
Right.
try and offer alternatives.
Here's one that.
Well,
if
I get it.
If
I
it
think we're
comes
all
up
on board with
is
it.
stipends. The selectmen voted that they could end up having stipends.
I think that did not make it.
It's in the budget.
Is that the latest?
Yep. Nothing has changed. Even the 16th has it.
Okay, I see it. So how are they paying for the voter guide? I mean, we can talk about this, but I thought that's where that money was coming from, was the voter guide cash.
No,
Lenny,
it
you know what,
came
let's
from the
leave it for the-
postcards that the
All right.
town clerk was
All
gonna
right.
send out for the fall town meeting and the
Yeah.
annual
Yeah,
town
so
meeting.
this is the level of discussion I think we could get into there. So on the motion to have a workshop on April 25th, motion made and seconded, how do you vote? Amy?
Yes.
Deb?
Yes.
Will?
Yes.
And I vote yes as well. We'll have to make sure that the others are made aware. I'll go on the website tonight and make that meeting.
I do think, though, that there should be some thoughtful preparation beforehand with a note to time. Like, I'm willing to stay as long as it takes to satisfy every member of this committee to run through it, but I don't want to do this for an exercise of like $5. I don't want to run through
I
and
agree.
argue about
We
you
have to
know,
be
a
doing
$30 line item for whatever, stamps or whatever. I agree that we should be thorough, and I agree that we should make sure that we're comfortable with things the way they are, knowing that certain things won't be cleared up, knowing that we're not going to have someone in here to tell us what every miscellaneous means for every account. That's just not how it's done at this point in time by this town. So, you know, I feel like ahead of time, what I'll be doing is going through and sort of giving a general eye to whether I feel like I agree with it or not. Knowing that I can't decide. I'm not the chief of police. I can't decide what the police need. I can't decide if the town accountant needs 12 rolls of accounting paper or just 6.
You might have a
So-
question, though, that when we hit on it, as to a particular line item,
I may.
I have questions, and they can discuss it tonight, but when we discuss it at that particular time, I will bring that question up.
Okay,
And
good.
say, okay, I understand, I see it, I see how much is there, I'd like to get clarification. If it's justified as to what it is, or who's gonna get it, I'll say yes.
But I'm
But-
with you, I don't wanna argue with them over, you know, a small amount of money.
Right. Because it's just,
Because it's not gonna make
I
a
feel
big.
like it will look really petty.
I know, and I'm losing my sheet, I know that the reason, one of the big reasons why we're doing this is because of this.
Mm-hmm.
And I just, you know, you're not gonna chip away anything that's gonna make a difference there.
Anything that you chip away, if it's 100 or 150,000, you can now make a motion that when it comes out for a substitute motion, because they're gonna come up and say, the school budget is $6,500,000. That's in the warrant, okay? Well, that's gonna be there. If we cut out 100,000, instead of 6,500,000, it's 6,600,000. It reduces the amount now for the override. So you have to make a substitute motion for the override. That shows people we did something. And if you don't think 50 or 100,000 is not significant,
It is. I just don't want to get there by like 2 cents and like $50 here and you know $200 over here.
Let's not go through the examples now, but I agree with you.
You
and
know,
I'm,
unless it's significant. Like Vadar, it was what $700 or $750.
700.
That does need to get cut from our thing because we didn't use it, and that is something we discussed. So that's great, and that I think is a worthwhile thing to discuss. So I don't know. We'll save it all
Yep.
for next week, and
well, thank you everyone for donating a little bit more time to your community. I think it's gonna be a well Hopefully it goes well, and we'll read up the
And
rest
see,
of the
with the
communities.
document I just gave you,
We're-
if you
we're,
do that, but
we're
line
up
by
to-
line, it will roll up.
So
And then
Yes.
we can say,
Yes.
here it
Moving-
is,
moving-
here's what we recommend.
Will,
Yes.
we're gonna move on to the member comments. Will, do you have any member comments?
Why? You're not gonna go to the other
Well, I
members?
didn't wanna break your stride.
Huh?
I didn't wanna break your line of thought, but I did wanna move on agenda-wise.
Well, my comment is that it's imperative that we do the job that the town expects from the advisory of finance. And that, going through that, your budget is our job. Whether we agree with everything or change some stuff, it's our job. I mean, I got a number of things that I have questions and that I see based upon the BVA, and I don't like to be snowballed. And I think we're getting snowballed on some stuff. Now, if I go to a town accountant and I say Commonwealth Mass Law, $50, you don't think I'm gonna sit here and say, cut it? I'm not gonna say cut it. But if there's a whole bunch of stuff and it falls somewhere else, I'm gonna say, let's cut it.
Okay.
I mean, when it comes to some other stuff also, I'm gonna say, let's cut it. There's certain stuff that I know is fixed. There's certain stuff that I know that we can end up changing. And that's basically because I've gone through this budget process before. There's some stuff that I know that we can't end up cutting the account. As an example, the last place you wanna take and end up, and if we end up going to this override and it doesn't pass, and we have to cut the budget at that time, I really fear that. I really, really fear that, because if we have to go that, and the town votes that, we're gonna have to go through this, and we're going to cripple some departments that, I mean, shouldn't be crippled. But it's a town's choice to vote some of this stuff. As an example, if it comes down to, cutting back on stuff within the selectmen's budget, and it means that you have to make significant cuts, maybe we cut some of the stuff that is not in somebody's contract. Like the administrator. You have your management fellow who is getting a significant raise. I don't know if we're gonna end up looking at that and say, gee, that's an awful lot of money to take and end up moving an individual that's only been here a year. Is it prudent to do that and have that burden upon the town? At this particular time, I don't know. I think that's something that, as a committee, when we come into that particular thing, is we come to some consensus. Same thing with the town accountant. Do we wanna take and end up having extra $7,500 for the second town? What does Templeton gain out of giving her some additional money to work on Hubbardston? It's costing us $7,500, and it's increasing the assistant town accountant
Well,
from part-time to full-time.
so I don't wanna, it's member comments time, so you're making comments, but I would urge you, the same way that Mr. May sends questions and gets, fairly prompt answers, you as a private citizen have absolutely every right to send a question to say why.
I follow
Why
what he's
for-
asking, and he doesn't always get prompt answers. I'm sorry. And I look at that.
Well, I'll tell
I
you-
read everything he gets.
Yeah, email why, but I would urge you to send that message, because I'd be interested to see what the response. Will, do you have any other comments?
Well, I think that we could use this format that I have to go through it fairly quickly. And we could come up with $50,000 or $100,000. It'd show that we're doing it.
Is that your sheet or is it
The sheet.
That's their
If-
sheet.
If you intend on doing that, I would.
That's
send-
their sheet with a
Send it to
column
us
for
ahead
our
of time.
recommendations.
Yep, send it to us, well, you already did.
You did
Already
send it
did.
to
I
us,
know,
yeah.
yep, I got that. All right, well, thank you.
Yep.
Any other member comments?
No,
Hearing none, I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
I will make a motion to adjourn.
Second.
Motion to adjourn and seconded, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
No discussion?
No, not for you, no.
All I was gonna say is I'm sorry that if you feel that I'm pushing hard on this, but past experience has told me that this is what we should be doing, and I wanna take it end up, I don't wanna take it end up being a burden to this committee, but I feel strongly about certain stuff that is our job. I mean, and that's really all I'm about, so.
No.
And I vote
I'm
to
not
take an,
upset. Okay,
also to take an adjourn.
I
Okay.
also.
we're done.